question.
Dale?
I think you might have answered it, but I'm not sure. I have read a lot of this and I've seen a lot of this. One of the things that has always stumped me on it is if we leave fractional banking, how do you grow the money supply to fit a $10 trillion economy? You can't slice gold that thin.
It depends on how you value the gold. If you were, for instance, Dale, if you were to take all of the deposits today and divvy up all the gold on reserve that's supposed to be on reserve in Fort Knox and in New York, it would be valued at around $30,000 an ounce. If you value it that way, you certainly can slice it up that much.
You can?
Well,
You couldn't see it.
you would,
The value goes
It'd
up.
be less than dust.
The value
But-
goes up
but the value is,
correspondingly.
yeah, the value would go up.
How do you go buy a $5 pair of shoes?
I'm not-
Instead of an
yeah.
ounce of gold being worth $1,200 an ounce,
She's right. How do you buy a $10 pair of shoes if an ounce is worth $30,000?
you sold it.
Yeah.
Then you're down to $10,000.
Yeah.
No, but it's still, it's a verifiable quantity. It
I'm
doesn't
not- I'm not following.
Okay,
It's not- it's not working.
the other way around this, Dale, is given the technology that we have today, if we let me go back here. If we eliminate the possibility of fractional reserve banking, right? Fractional reserve banking is, I don't know where it is anymore. If it's illegal to have fractional reserve, that means that the gold is on deposit someplace. You contract with the bank and say, I have an ounce, I have a $30,000 piece of gold on deposit with you. And now you can write checks against it. And they're the custodian for that. And with technology being what it is, you could spend it digitally, by check, with paper, with a note, and transfer your ownership of that gold that's on deposit to someone else. There's also then, we used to spend pennies, copper. We used to spend pennies. We had base metal coinage. So if there are ways around this, either digitally or with notes, as long as we are not being fraudulent in the way we're banking it in the bank, as long as we have it on deposit. So that's, I don't know exactly the details how this is going to work out, but if we turn the people loose, it's like we talked about in the division of labor, things that I haven't imagined are going to crop up.
I've gone through this study a couple times from different people, and I always get to the point at the end, okay, I get it, that's wrong, what's right? Okay, and it seems like nobody answers that question, at least in a way that my mind can understand it.
We live in a world that is dominated by banks. Fractional reserve banking is the world we live in right now. If we're going to engage in commerce in this world, right now, we're going to be dealing with fractional reserve banks, Federal Reserve notes, and the like. What we can do is you can buy silver, you can buy gold physically, put it on deposit someplace, put it under your mattress, wherever you're going to do that, to store your value, to stand on your principles of what real money and real stores of value are. But if you're going to engage in commerce, you've got to use a bank. We've run into that at IRBC, Independence Reformed Bible Church, in trying to get a bank account without being incorporated. It's hard. So yeah, we've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, but that's where we are right now. John.
Just want to respond. We used to have something that was near real money in this country. People did not like carrying around gold coins in their pocket because they're heavy and inconvenient. So they had gold certificates.
Yep.
It was a guarantee that you could take to the bank, any bank, and convert to gold if you so desired. You can print as many gold certificates as you want. You can divide them up as you said. It still represents the same aggregate amount of gold that's in the United States. But you can have many, many pieces of paper divided into smaller and smaller units. Or you can use a lesser value coinage like silver. And you can have as much expansion in your economy as you need.
Yes, sir.
Since we're talking about money, what is your take on Bitcoin?
Bitcoin. Okay. Bitcoin's an interesting study. As we talked about at the end, if that is does everybody understand what Bitcoin is? Okay, nobody does. That's one of the problems with it. Bitcoin is a digital currency that has no government involvement. And so what happens, there's a complex algorithm in the computer cloud that allows for mining, so-called mining of Bitcoins. And their value fluctuates, it goes up and down as far as its value in dollars. You can trade Bitcoins for digital services and digital things on the internet. But if you went to the store to buy a gallon of milk, you would have to convert your Bitcoin somehow into Federal Reserve notes in order to buy the milk. So that, in a nutshell, is what Bitcoins are. They are digital currency available on the internet. Now, what about them? There's no commodity that underlies them. But as we say here at the bottom, if you want to write a contract and you want to use Bitcoins, as long as it's not fraudulent, but therein lies the problem. We don't know what underlies the computer algorithm that creates Bitcoins. And there was it Mt. Gox that lost, I don't know, $10 million worth of Bitcoins because nobody knows what happened to it. Did somebody walk off with them? Did the computer crash? That mystery hasn't been solved yet. So, what are they? Are they fraudulent? But if you want to use them, it's just like fractional reserve banking. If you want to use fractional reserve bank, it actually worked very well during the free banking era in the United States when contracts were enforced. When the directors were on the hook for it, they ran those banks pretty tight. And they didn't make funny loans. And they paid a lot of attention to what was in their vaults and what currency they issued. I have here a book somewhere. I'm not sure where my briefcase ended up, but it's a American Banknote Company book from like the 1950s. And it has all kinds of examples of banknotes that were printed up for the free banks. If you were the first third bank of Dubuque, Iowa, and you were free bank, your own bank, you were issuing the first third bank of Iowa notes saying, I have this money on deposit at my bank. And so they had their own notes. And Reading Trust Company had its own notes, and everybody did. So if you trust federal or fractional reserve and you want to use that, that's fine. You should use that. I don't trust it. I think it's a fraud, and I think it should be outlawed. But if people decide to do that, then I'm going to say, okay, just know what you're getting into, and you take your own risks.
You also use the illustration about Joseph and
The grain, yes,
being more valuable than gold or whatever your other example was. So what about things like, shouldn't we be considering things like water and hard assets type of investments, let's say, based upon that?
Yeah.
Because things become very valuable if you have a drought and if you have
That's exactly
some type of natural disaster.
Or you have a monetary disaster.
Right.
Suppose that all of a sudden the money is gone, because it's all based on debt, and when the debts don't get paid and the derivatives crisis comes, it may very well be that all the money is simply wiped out.
Right.
all the deposits could be wiped out because they're all based on a deposit that was made from debt. And if all the debts are gone because of the derivative crisis, then all the money's gone as well. And so, yeah, I mean, it's never a bad idea to have some things in reserve. But now you're getting into the whole idea of preppers and prepping for either a natural disaster, financial disaster, all kinds of disasters. It's never a bad idea to have some of those things reserved. It's not a bad idea to have some of these things sitting around because somebody will trade you something for this. I mean, even if it's a fourth cab of dump's dung. You know, so yeah, it's not a bad idea to have things. It's the idea that we've talked about though is that money is a commodity. You're just talking about different commodities. And grain became the money as a different commodity in that situation because the values were being imputed differently as situations change. Audrey?
Is there such a thing as black market banking?
I don't
Where-
know. I mean, I don't
know. You know,
I've
where
never-
there are people that
Say
will
like loan
protect.
sharks? I mean, I
No,
guess.
I mean, below the radar of the government banking where your gold and your silver can be protected and.
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. It's sort of like shadow banking or shadow banking system. I hear about it. Yes.
Some of the reading that I've done recently says that the government is taking very strong steps in recent years to eliminate that. And there was a lot of offshore banking.
Yes.
And people that were, even with the Swiss bankers, a lot of banks now in Switzerland that traditionally were shields for tax havens for the rich and famous no longer even want American depositors. So even some Americans that were working in Switzerland said they can't even deposit their money over there because they're American.
Right.
Our government now is even charging people if you want to turn in your citizenship, $2,300
Yeah.
to leave the United States and say I don't want to be an American citizen anymore. That's just recently.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in 1947, I think it was, Winston Churchill gave a speech in the Midwest, and he talked about the Iron Curtain that was descending over Eastern Europe. And the United States is doing the same thing. The United States is drawing a financial Iron Curtain around our country so that you can't get the money out because eventually they know this is coming. They know that this pyramid of money cannot stand. It's an inverted, impossible pyramid. And so the last thing they want is for people to have a ready means of escaping the financial mess that we're in. So FATCA is the name of the tax bill that was passed, the Financial Accountability Tax and Control Act or something like that, where if you have money on deposit outside the United States in excess of $10,000 anywhere outside of the United States and you are a U.S. citizen, you must report it to the IRS under penalty. I mean, there's severe penalties. There was a fellow in Chicago, he was a survivor of the Holocaust, who had a Swiss bank account. He's way in his 80s now. FATCA passed. This guy's not going to know about FATCA. He has his deposit in the Swiss bank account. They're going to put an 84-year-old man in jail because he did not report to the IRS that he had a $50,000 bank account in Switzerland. Well, what's that about? Well, what that's about is scaring people into keeping their money here. Why? So the government can take it. So that you don't have it. It's one of the reasons that tax-advantaged retirement accounts, IRAs, pensions, those things that accumulate money without tax, it's all identified. It used to be, I worked for a company where I ended up having to deal with some pension and profit sharing filings. It used to be that we simply reported the contributions that we made. Now we have to provide the taxpayer identification number of everyone who has an amount in theirs, just to make sure that the government knows where these tax-advantaged amounts are. Well, why do they want to know? Well, what if they need to tax them? They want to, or what if they want to take some? You read this all the time, and they've actually floated this. This came up on the floor of Congress, talking about a one-time 25% tax on all tax-free accounts, because it's just been accumulating there, and, well, we need the money. Well, if they're going to take 25%, why not take 50% or whatever? And so in Cyprus, we've all heard of the Cyprus affair that was about a year and a half ago now. The Cyprus banks got in trouble. Well, the government came up with a program they called it a bail-in. Instead of a bailout, they bailed in. And what they did is they just converted people's accounts into bank reserves. You don't have an account here anymore, the bank has it. It's not your money anymore. Thank you very much. And they just did it. It's being talked about here. It's a mess. And it's all because we have fractional reserve banking. They built this pyramid that can't be sustained. Randy.
Along those same lines, I don't know how many in the room know the Amero,
The Amero.
North American.
Speak up.
Yeah, the Amero. The Amero, they already have that money in place for that North American.
Free trade zone.
Yes.
Yes. The Amero's already been printed there. If you search for it hard enough, you'll find pictures of it on the internet. The Amero. For when the money fails, if the derivatives crisis collapses the banking system and nobody has any money, then what will happen is that Federal Reserve notes will be declared obsolete. You'll be able to take your Federal Reserve notes to a bank and exchange them, maybe 20 to 1 or 1 to 20, however it's going to work, for Ameros, which is will be a new fractional reserve system. But what it'll do is it'll flush all of the quiet cash, maybe the under the radar cash that you were talking about, Audrey. It flushes all of that out of mattresses and safe deposit boxes and strong boxes and gets it all back to the government. And guess what? They'll restate their bond values as well, and they won't owe as much as they think they do. You had a question there as well?
I did the statement and a question, but I'm always and thank you. This is very interesting stuff. I've studied this for a pretty long time, and I'm in a line of work there. I end up working with some of this on the edges. It's just interesting to watch. But I'm always fascinated in how people, how naive I think the average American is to understand exactly just how much in debt we are when you look at a federal level and state level, the municipals, our school districts, our municipalities, et cetera, and I hope they repeal or they change the school tax law. I think that would be huge for us. But the question I have is when you look at the money supply graph that you showed up front,
Yep.
and just watching this and watching, I think even back as early as 2010, I think we had already doubled or tripled the money supply just in a very, very short period of time. I don't even know exponentially what it is at this point. But I'm just surprised that we have not yet seen the rush of inflation. I know there's small warnings going off here and there. Is it just because every other country in the world, which is because money's relative between the euro and everybody else, we all devalued at the same time?
We are all devaluing. It's what a beggar thy neighbor policy is what it's called, where everybody's debasing at about the same rate. But the other reason is that the money that had to be printed up in 2008 and 9 and 10 was to save the banks. The collateral inside the banks had been marked down. There was a law that was passed by the Accounting Standards Board, the ASCPA, that's now another Financial Accounting Standards Board, FASB. Yes, had passed a law. It was called mark to market,
Right.
where the financial institutions, including banks, had to recognize on their books what's the actual value of the collateral underlying the loans that I've made.
That's what the OCC is impounding banks in their balance sheets for the last
Exactly.
years, yeah.
And so what happened was all of a sudden the collateral wasn't worth as much as they thought because the real estate collapsed, especially. And so the banks were all in trouble, and the banks didn't have enough reserve to support the fraction, they didn't have enough of a fraction of the reserve to support what they had out on loan. And so that required huge calls on loans. Well, even that was not enough to keep the banks open. By law, they were in violation of the laws, and they were going to have to close.
So say the first compression was deleveraging, so we had to print money just to make up for that.
What we did is we printed money to give it to the banks so that they had enough on their balance sheet so that they wouldn't have to close. The Federal Reserve just jammed it into them. And a lot of banks, even if they didn't want it, had to take it. And so that's where that first rush comes in, and it's just had to continue. Now what happened is, because the banks were already in trouble, what they did is they ran those reserves in. Now they're in compliance, but there's nobody out there worth lending to. So they're not lending it into the system. What they've done is they've got most of that money that's been printed on deposit with the Federal Reserve, and it's not being lent out into the economy. The Federal Reserve could change that at any moment. Right now, the Federal Reserve is actually paying them a small amount of interest for the deposits that they have. So a little bit of interest is better than losing it by lending it to somebody like me. And that's the way the banks are operating right now. That's why we don't have this inflation, because it's just not getting out into the economy. As soon as that kind of money hits, because of the multiplier effect, it will just explode the prices, because it will, the money supply that's actually in circulation and available, I think that the Federal Reserve ratio right now is 5%, which means that for every dollar that a bank has on deposit, they can lend 20. And so when all that stuff comes to be lent, now all of a sudden you're going to multiply that graph by 20? That's horrible.
So are we looking at, are you convinced we're looking at inflation, or are we looking at a crisis caused by contraction or deflation?
I think we're going to see both. I think we'll end up seeing an inflationary crisis that is prompted by a deflationary crisis first. Somebody's going to fail, and there's going to be this contraction, and then they're going to have to they've got to get the money back out into circulation.
The irony is, when you look at the number of people that are obviously receiving funds or whatever from the government, when
Yeah.
you look at the food stamp program,
Yeah.
et cetera, it's almost like they've pushed a significant chunk of the population into indentured servitude or on the welfare rolls. So,
Not being moral.
well, yeah, right. That's funny. So that almost feels a lot like contraction, more so than inflation.
In a sense, because they're not productive. People aren't working. People have given up looking for work.
But then we're creating money by borrowing and then.
And we're doing it a lot of that has been done for the banks. Let's face it, the really immoral part of that crisis was when the FASB had the market rules, and it collapsed all the banks, and they had to shove the money in them. Well, then the next year the FASB said, we can't have this, so they reversed themselves. And now you could mark, instead of marking your collateral to what the market says it is worth, they marked it back to myth, what they think it's worth. And so, all of a sudden we have plenty of reserves, and we have all this extra money, and guess what? The money that we lost last year because we had to take a write-down, and we had a loss, well, we put it back in our books, now we have these record profits, and all this extra money, let's give bonuses to the directors. Let's give bonuses to the officers. It's looting. It's just out,
For the benefit of the group here, could you just describe some of the implications of deflation?
Deflation. Deflation is what we went through in the Depression. It's a contraction of the money supply, because the money supply is based on the debt. We just talked about how a dollar on reserve supports $20 of loans. And so what happens is, when the bank loses too much money because it's not being able to collect, now it has to call in loans. Well, that takes money out of somebody else's bank. When that loan gets called, that's taking money out of that guy's bank. Now he has to call in a loan. And you can see how this just spreads from bank to bank to bank. And the higher the multiplier, or the lower the reserve requirement, the faster that contracts. In the Depression, our reserves ratio, our official reserve ratio was 20%. So it was only 5 to 1, and that caused the Great Depression. Now we're 20. So the implications are that all of a sudden there's no money. And actually, in a situation like that, currency wouldn't be a bad thing, because the value of your currency is going to start to go up. So, you know, having a sock full of actual paper money, pictures of dead presidents, isn't necessarily going to be a bad thing. That'll be a really bad thing when the Amero crisis comes into play and you're going to have, and you can't use it. Then you're going to wish you had silver, because that's real.
One more.
Yep.
One more question. Go ahead.
Yes.
I would agree that the biblical monetary system would be the ideal system. I would agree that currently it'll take a collapse of whatever our current monetary system is to get us away from that, but I'm wondering what would it take to get this simple world society there instead of going right back to debt and fiat money and fractional.
Yeah, well, it's a God thing. You know, it's what we're doing here is trying to educate people, spread the word. We often talk about the American Revolution was probably 5 to 7% of the population was really for it, and they brought it about. We need those kinds of numbers. We need 5 to 10% of the people understanding what's going on here. I know we're not even close to that at this point, but what we need is enough people to be cognizant of these issues so that when the debate begins, there's some voices out there somewhere that are saying, no, this has got to be this way. In a general collapse, what happens is you're going to have little economies. You're going to have, first you're going to have city economies, and then you're going to have state or regional economies. Yeah, and it'll, with the Weimar, right? And it'll eventually get put back together. But people are going to be able to say, oh, this really worked well here in Reading, and that didn't work so hot over here in Atlanta. And you know, and there will be a debate. There will be. And what we can do is we can rely on God's providence. But that's always true. That's all we have. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
great. Thanks.